good friend of mine was babysitting for her granddaughter. The little girl says, "Why don't we play house? You be the baby and I'll be the mommy." So the bubby lays her head down on the pillow, and the little girl pats her on the kepi and says, "You go to sleep now, baby. I have to go buy some things on Amazon." It's a true story, by the way. There are moments when we find out things about ourselves that surprise even us. I am sure the mother never realized exactly how much time she spent online shopping or the impression that it was making on her young daughter. And after hearing this story from the grandmother, I am pretty sure that the mom, next time she puts her daughter down for a nap, will say, "You go to sleep now, baby. I have to go online to make some charitable donations." Now, this is a mild story of parenting gone wrong, of course, amusing even. The story in our Torah portion, Shmini, however, is neither mild nor amusing. Aaron, as a father and as a high priest, believes that he has mentored his sons, Nadav and Avihu, very well for their roles at the altar of God. But alas, he realizes too late that he has failed in some way to prepare them for their sacred duty, for when they come forward to offer the sacrifice, they are consumed by an Eish Zara, by a strange fire. And Aaron, the text reads, their father, fell silent. After all, what could he say in the wake of such a cruel irony? Nadav and Avihu were punished not for any wrongdoing, no matter what the Midrash might try to argue to justify the harshness of the punishment. No, they were punished for trying to do the right thing, for trying to serve God faithfully. This past week, you may have read that the Reform movement, in coalition with several other Jewish organizations, including HIAS and the conservative and Reconstructionist organizations, issued a statement decrying the defunding of Harvard and the other universities accused of violating the Title VI rights of their Jewish students on campus. Students who inarguably are facing untenable levels of anti-Semitism and religious intimidation. Now, a friend of mine, who is generally a liberal, found himself disturbed that these organizations, all of which he supports, had signed on to this letter. And in his text to me, he termed their actions as, quote, suicidal empathy. Suicidal empathy. I found myself speechless, like Aaron. For I realized that what he was saying was that by doing the right thing, defending the freedom of speech on campus, these Jewish organizations were inviting the strange fire of anti-Semitism to consume our all too vulnerable students. Strange fire, indeed. There are moments in one's life when one is forced to wrestle with one's own values. Not between right and wrong, that is relatively easy, but between right and right. Defending the rights of Jewish students on campus is right. Defending free speech is right. What is a Jew to think? I have no idea, by the way. So if you are looking to an answer to this thorny dilemma, you have come to the wrong place. Although, as a Princeton alum, I must say that any defunding of Harvard sounds like a good thing to me on principle. But no, I have not come to share my position with you, but rather to share my struggle. So at least you will know you are not alone if you are experiencing the same. You see, reading his text brought me right back to what turned out to be a major turning point in my own life. It was 1978, and I was a 21-year-old, soon-to-be college graduate, who, due to his parents' involvement in the organization, had been a proud card-carrying member of the ACLU since his bar mitzvah. Then the organization announced that they would be defending the rights of Nazis to march in the streets of Skokie, Illinois. My parents were nonplussed, believing that free speech was the ultimate value that had to be defended at all costs. I was not so sure. It seemed to me that there should be limits to free speech, and that other democracies, including DAFCA, Germany, were able to outlaw hate speech and violent speech without plummeting into autocracy. I felt in my very kishkas that lawyers, mostly Jewish lawyers, by the way, defending Nazis was crossing over the line into suicidal empathy, although, of course, I had not heard that term at the time. Just as one could argue that defending so-called student groups that are receiving funding from terrorist organizations today might be crossing over that line as well. So I quit the ACLU that year, despite an abiding appreciation for the important constitutional work that they otherwise do. This was not right versus wrong. This was right versus right. Hence this sermon. It is a tough issue, to be sure. So I asked a group of well-educated Jews whose opinions I trust what they felt about the letter. And as you might imagine, the responses were mixed. One opined that any attack on free speech and academic freedom is not only a violation of civil rights, but also, in the long run, a danger to the Jews. Another pointed out that defunding an organization is not tantamount to denying them free speech. The democratically elected government, he argued, has the right to fund or not fund any organization. The college can still practice as it sees fit, just not using communal dollars. Besides, if this were happening to any other minority, it would never be tolerated. And what other leverage does the government have to stop this abject discrimination than the withholding of funds? A third worried about the effects of the defunding on medicine and science and cited the case of a UC Davis researcher, Dr. Charles DeCarli, the nation's top expert in dementia, whose funding was temporarily cut off by the National Institution of Health on the grounds that his choice of dementia subjects perpetuated a DEI agenda. And a fourth respondent threw his hands up in the air, sighed, and said simply, "I am just struggling to figure out what is best for the Jews." And friends, that is exactly where I find myself as well. At the end of the day, I am left with the question, what is best for the Jews? For you see, when I said that the Skokie March was a turning point in my own life, it was no hyperbole. Because up until that moment, I was planning on becoming a lawyer, and specifically a constitutional lawyer. And then, at least some people thought, that would lead to a career in politics. The Skokie affair made me realize something about myself that surprised even me. Until that moment, I had always considered myself a universalist. But when push came to shove, it turned out that I really cared more about the Jewish people, the very particular Jewish people, and thus wanted to devote myself to their welfare instead of the welfare of society as a whole. And so I eschewed law school and took the particularistic path of becoming a rabbi, rather than the more universalistic one I had thought myself to be on. Now, this struggle between universalism and particularism is not new to Judaism. In just a few moments after the announcements, we will rise for the adoration. At least that is what we as Reform Jews call it. In our Sidurim, it is all about love and adoration of God's role in creating the entire universe for all people. But during the Inquisition, there were specific lines inserted in this prayer to ferret out spies who sought to infiltrate their prayer services. So in referring to the other nations of the earth, these beleaguered worshipers in Spain would chant, "They bow down to nonsense and worthlessness." Not so universalistic, to be sure, but self-protective, since they figured that a devout Christian would not utter those words for fear of retribution from his God, and thus be revealed as a spy when his mouth was not moving. Folks, we often refer to Reform Judaism as prophetic Judaism and posit the prophets as paragons of social justice and universalistic ideals. And yet, if you actually read the prophets, you will see that although there are some references to helping the widow and the orphan, to social action, if you will, their primary overriding concern was the protection and promulgation of the Israelite nation and religion. Which brings us back to the question, where do you stand on that precarious continuum, that narrow bridge, that oh so narrow bridge between universalism and particularism? Is the universal right of free speech the deciding factor for you? Or is it the protection of the Jewish students on campus? Alas, I am not here to answer those questions for you, but rather to ask them of you and of myself. And then, perhaps, perplexed, I might just go take a nap and buy some things on Amazon. But what I do seriously hope, and what I pray, is that no matter what our answers to these painful, wrenching, disturbing questions may be, we are all of us, seeking in our own individual ways to protect ourselves, our families, our people, our nation, and our world from this very, very strange fire. Shabbat Shalom.